What if I told you that the Victorians, those people we mock for their stuffiness and their obsession with etiquette, had accidentally discovered a psychological principle so powerful that modern neuroscience is only now catching up? And what if this forgotten rule could fix your fractured attention, restore your energy, and give you back the sense of control you've been desperately searching for? You're about to discover why the most productive, creative, and mentally resilient people of the Victorian era followed one specific boundary that we've completely abandoned. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why breaking this rule might be the single biggest mistake you're making right now. But first, let me paint you a picture. It's 1873, London. A successful banker leaves his office at precisely 5 o'clock in the evening. He walks through the door of his home and something remarkable happens. He doesn't check his ledgers. He doesn't review correspondence from clients. He doesn't think about the stock exchange. For the next 14 hours, his work simply does not exist. His mind is completely, utterly free. Now compare that to your life. You wake up and immediately check your phone, work emails at breakfast, Slack messages during lunch, you're thinking about that presentation while playing with your kids, you're mentally drafting responses to your boss while supposedly relaxing on the couch. Your bedroom, your sanctuary, has become an extension of your office. Your mind never stops working because the boundary between work and life has completely dissolved. The Victorians had a rule. It wasn't written in any official handbook, it wasn't enforced by law, but it was so deeply embedded in their culture that violating it would have been considered not just rude, but psychologically dangerous. The rule was simple. When you cross the threshold of your home, work ends, completely, absolutely, without exception. They called it keeping sacred the domestic sphere. We've forgotten it entirely. And here's what's fascinating. The Victorians weren't more disciplined than you. They weren't superhuman. They didn't have better willpower. They simply had a culture that enforced a hard boundary between professional life and personal life. And that boundary did something remarkable to their brains. See, your brain operates on what neuroscientists call context-dependent memory. When you're in one environment, your brain activates specific neural networks associated with that space. Your office triggers work mode. Your gym triggers exercise mode. Your home should trigger rest and recovery mode. But when you blur these boundaries, when you answer work emails from your bed, when you take Zoom calls from your kitchen table, you're essentially telling your brain that everywhere is work. And when everywhere is work, your brain never fully disengages. The Victorians understood this intuitively. They didn't have the neuroscience to explain it, but they felt it. They knew that a man who brought his work worries to the dinner table was not only being rude to his family, he was damaging his own capacity for joy, for presence, for mental restoration. Let me tell you about Charles Dickens, one of the most prolific writers in history. He wrote 15 novels, countless short stories, edited magazines, and gave public readings that drew thousands. How did he do it? He had an ironclad rule. He wrote from 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. That was it. 5 hours. After 2 o'clock, writing was over. He would go for long walks, spend time with his family, attend social gatherings, engage in his various projects. But he never, ever brought the manuscript to the dinner table. The work stayed in the workspace. His mind was allowed to fully disengage. And here's the counterintuitive part. This boundary didn't make him less productive, it made him more productive. Because when he sat down at 9 the next morning, his mind was fresh. His creative wells had been refilled. He hadn't spent the previous evening anxiously ruminating about plot problems. He had given his subconscious mind space to process, to make unexpected connections, to do the deep work that only happens when you're not consciously trying. Modern research confirms this. A study from Stanford University found that productivity per hour declines sharply when the work week exceeds 50 hours. After 55 hours, productivity drops so much that you're barely getting anything done at all. Your brain needs recovery time. It needs boundaries. It needs sacred space where work cannot intrude. But we've convinced ourselves that we're different, that we're special, that the rules of human psychology somehow don't apply to us because we have technology. We wear our burnout like a badge of honor. We brag about how little we sleep, how many hours we work, how we're always hustling. And we're miserable. We're anxious, exhausted, and paradoxically less productive than ever. The Victorians would have looked at us with horror, not because they were lazy. Victorian England was the industrial powerhouse of the world. They built empires, revolutionized manufacturing, made incredible scientific discoveries. They worked hard, but they also understood something we've forgotten. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. Rest is what makes productivity possible. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, but I can't do that. My job requires me to be available. My boss expects responses at night. I'll fall behind if I disconnect. And here's where we need to have an honest conversation. You're right that modern work culture is toxic. You're right that many employers have unreasonable expectations. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you respond to that email at 9 p.m., every time you work through the weekend without pushing back, you're training your employer to expect that behavior. You're not being a good employee, you're being complicit in a system that's destroying your mental health. The Victorians had something we've lost: social reinforcement of boundaries. If a Victorian businessman showed up at someone's home at 8 p.m. to discuss a business matter, he would have been considered outrageously rude. The social pressure to maintain boundaries was enormous. Today, we have the opposite. We have social pressure to always be available, always be hustling, always be on. But here's what's powerful. You can create these boundaries for yourself. You can reclaim the Victorian rule, even in a modern context. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to heal. Your creativity returns. Your relationships deepen. You remember what it feels like to be fully present in a moment. Let me give you the practical framework. This is how you implement the forgotten Victorian rule in your life today. First, define your threshold. For the Victorians, it was literally the front door of their home. For you, it might be different. Maybe it's a specific time, like 6 p.m. Maybe it's a physical space, like your bedroom. Maybe it's a ritual, like changing out of work clothes. The key is that it's concrete, specific, and non-negotiable. When you cross that threshold, work ends. Second, communicate your boundary. This is crucial. Send an email to your colleagues and clients. I'm implementing new working hours to improve my productivity and well-being. I'll be available from these hours to these hours. Outside of those times, I will not be responding to non-emergency communications. Yes, this might feel uncomfortable. Yes, some people might push back. But here's the secret. Most people will respect it. And the ones who don't are revealing something important about themselves and the culture you're working in. Third, create physical separation. If you work from home, this is especially important. Your bedroom cannot be your office. Your dinner table cannot be your conference room. If you don't have space for a separate office, create psychological separation. Work from a specific chair. When you're done, physically close your laptop and put it in a drawer. Out of sight, out of mind. Fourth, develop transition rituals. The Victorians were masters of ritual. They understood that the mind needs signals to shift from one mode to another. Your transition ritual might be a walk around the block. It might be a specific piece of music you listen to. It might be a cup of tea or a change of clothes. The content doesn't matter. What matters is that it's consistent and it marks the end of work mode. Fifth, protect your cognitive space. This is the hardest part for most people. Even if you're not physically working, you might be mentally working, ruminating about that difficult conversation, planning tomorrow's presentation, worrying about the project deadline. This is still work. This is still crossing the boundary. You need to actively redirect your mind. When work thoughts intrude, acknowledge them without judgment and gently redirect your attention to the present moment. What are you doing right now? Who are you with? What can you see, hear, feel? The Victorians had an advantage here. They didn't have smartphones. They couldn't check work email in bed because work email didn't exist. You need to recreate that technological boundary. Phone goes in another room at night. Email app gets deleted from your phone. Notifications get turned off after work hours. Yes, this will feel terrifying at first. You'll be convinced that something urgent will come up and you'll miss it. But here's the reality. True emergencies are extraordinarily rare, and in a genuine emergency, people will find a way to reach you. Now, let's talk about what happens when you implement this. The first week will be uncomfortable. You'll feel phantom vibrations from your phone. You'll have intrusive thoughts about work. You'll feel guilty, like you're somehow being lazy or irresponsible. This is normal. You're breaking an addiction. Your brain has been trained to expect constant stimulation, constant availability. It takes time to retrain it. But around the second week, something shifts. You'll notice that you're sleeping better. Those racing thoughts at 3 a.m. start to quiet down. You're falling asleep faster and waking up feeling more rested. By the third week, you'll notice changes in your relationships. Your partner mentions that you seem more present. Your kids stop having to compete with your phone for attention. Conversations become deeper, more meaningful, because you're actually listening instead of mentally composing your response to that work message. And here's the beautiful paradox. Around the fourth week, you'll notice something shocking. You're actually more productive during work hours. Your focus is sharper. Your creative problem solving is better. Tasks that used to take 2 hours now take 90 minutes. Why? Because your brain has finally been given permission to fully engage and then fully disengage. You're working with your biology instead of against it. The Victorians knew this. They called it proper rest. We've forgotten it and replaced it with this bizarre concept of work-life balance, as if work and life are two things that need to be carefully weighed against each other. But that's not balance. That's just slow-motion burnout. True balance isn't about working 8 hours and then relaxing 4 hours. It's about complete separation. It's about sacred boundaries. Think about the ripple effects. When you stop working at night, you model healthy boundaries for your colleagues. When you refuse to respond to non-urgent messages outside of work hours, you give others permission to do the same. You're not just changing your life, you're contributing to a cultural shift back towards sanity. And here's something the Victorians understood that we desperately need to remember. Your worth is not determined by your productivity. You are not your job. You are not your output. You are a human being with inherent value, and you deserve rest. You deserve presence. You deserve a life that exists beyond the demands of your employer. The Victorian rule wasn't about being rigid or stuffy. It was about being human. It was about recognizing that we are not machines. We cannot operate at full capacity 24 hours a day. We need rhythms. We need boundaries. We need sacred spaces where the demands of the world cannot reach us. So here's your challenge. Starting today, define your threshold. Decide where work ends. Communicate it to the people who need to know. Create your transition ritual. And then, most importantly, honor it. When you cross that threshold, work is over. Completely. Without exception. Your phone stays in another room, your laptop stays closed, your mind gets to rest. Will it be easy? No. Will some people be confused or even upset? Possibly. Will you sometimes feel guilty or anxious? Absolutely. But here's what I can promise you. If you stick with it, if you honor this boundary with the same seriousness that the Victorians did, your life will transform. You'll remember what it feels like to be fully present with your family. You'll rediscover hobbies and interests that have been buried under the weight of constant work. You'll sleep better, think clearer, and paradoxically achieve more in less time. You'll stop feeling like you're constantly treading water and start feeling like you're actually living. The Victorians weren't perfect. They had their own problems, their own blind spots, but they understood something about human psychology that we've lost in our addiction to productivity and constant connectivity. They understood that boundaries aren't restrictions, they're liberation. They're what make true rest possible, and true rest is what makes true work possible. The rule is simple. When you cross the threshold, work ends. It's been forgotten for decades, but it's waiting for you to reclaim it. Your mind is waiting for permission to rest. Your relationships are waiting for your full presence. Your life is waiting for you to actually live it. The question is, are you brave enough to remember what the Victorians knew? Are you willing to draw a line and say, this far and no further? Are you ready to reclaim your evenings, your weekends, your mental peace? The threshold is waiting. What happens when you cross it is up to you.